but November the 29th we'll be married 40 years. 40 years. Seems like only yesterday. Is this on? Yeah, that's fine. That's good. Who was it? Remember what was his name? He used to have great lines about that. You know, the older gentleman that used to come with his wife was. Oh yeah, I forget what this guy used to come here, and he's a very old man, and he was in his 80s, and his wife's in her late 80s. She was very sick, but he used to sit, and he had the greatest lines. I mean, he was really a treasure, and I'll never forget sitting here with him. And his wife was very small, you know, and it's very old. And he sat here, and I remember him saying, as he looked at her walking by, he says, "You know, Bill, the days are getting longer, and what's her name? Claire's getting shorter." Then one day, somebody was talking to me about the implications, the symbolic implications of the Last Supper, and I was talking about the Last Supper, and Al come over. He said, "Excuse me, let me interrupt you. My wife catered that affair." Oh, he was something. He was really something, and so as things go, huh? I don't know. Is he still with us?
Yeah,
Are you?
Sure.
No, okay.
Claire's in the nursing home.
Oh God, that's too bad.
Is that last week?
No, this is, I took this with him. Oh, I'm sorry that we didn't pay attention to you on television. We're just, but let's go. Last week, we concluded the message with the words of Lao Tzu. I don't know how many of you know of Lao Tzu. If you don't know, you spell it Laotzu. And he is a philosopher from China, ancient China. And, you know, we've been talking about Mani and the subject of good and evil and pain and suffering and all of these things. And when you flee from the pain of life and the hurt of what we've been taught in this life, Lao Tzu's words are very encouraging. Because people around us laugh at us. I mean, it becomes a joke, and we're ridiculed for taking a position that is contrary. And they go on fighting each other and killing each other, and all the bad things go on. And they're assured that only their group has the answer, and they laugh. But I love Lao Tzu's words, and we read them last week, because he so wisely defines the systems in which we live. And this is what he said. "When the wise man learns the way, he tries to live by it. When the average man learns the way, he lives by only part of it. When the fool learns the way, he laughs at it. Yet if the fool did not laugh at it, it would not be the way. Indeed, if you are seeking the way, listen for the laughter of fools." I thought it was a beautiful, beautiful sentiment. And last week, somebody asked me also to repeat the words of Plotinus, Plotinus of Greece, who was one of the classic Greeks whom we're very concerned and suspicious about their originating in 45-55. But anyhow, he defined religion. And I don't know if you want to write this down, and I don't want to write it here, but I should have made a copy. I just didn't get a chance because of this week. But this is what he said in defining religion. Plotinus considered religion to be barbarous, melodramatic, irrational, immoral, totally un-Greek, and insanely arrogant superstition. Now this was a couple of thousand years ago, so little has changed, in the evolution of this. But that was Plotinus' work. This has been a simply amazing week for our work here. I have done this, and with only, I have a job, thank God, I have a decent job, and I've been with this same company since, well, the company's changed, but I've been there since 1974. And they treat me very well. In fact, we were up in New Hope last night to the house for my boss, the guy that's the vice president of the company. Went to a party at his place. But anyhow, all I've ever asked for with this stuff, because I was always afraid to sell it or to do what a lot of people have always encouraged me to do, because I was afraid that, you know, if I got too deeply involved in my name or whatever, you know, that I could possibly lose it, because I don't know where it comes from and how it comes to me. And, you know, the thing with 45, 55 in that tower was a real hit to me that something's going on here. So I you know, I just didn't know. And then I thought, well, you know, everybody's saying, you know, you're the only one and so forth and so on. And, you know, I said, how, and I've often either lied in bed on the couch or sat by myself saying, you know, this is pretty good stuff, and, you know, it's going to Forked River, and basically that's it in a few places. But then we tried the website to help to spread it, because all I've ever asked or wanted to happen was to be able to share this with people, to tell people. So this has been quite a week. That where we go from here, I'm not sure. I'm overwhelmed by it, but let me tell you what happened. There's a radio program that comes on the air at 12 midnight in California. It's on 3 a.m. here. And it's hosted by a guy named Art Bell. And he talks about a lot of the things we talk about. Maybe not so much coming from the spiritual side as we do, more coming from the scientific side or whatever. But anyhow, he's on ABC radio and goes all over the country. I mean, the American Broadcasting Company. Well, the other morning, we got a call about 9 o'clock in the morning from Carol Macon, who used to come here and who's been sick. But anyhow, Carol Macon said, "You're not going to believe this." I said, "Well, try me, you know, let's see." She says, "Somebody called the Art Bell program and told them about you, mentioned your name, and gave the address of the website." I said, "Well, my goodness, you know, that's great." She says, "Well, you know," she was all excited about that. And, you know, I've never even heard Art Bell, so I didn't know. To make a long story short, something absolutely startling has occurred. Last Tuesday, I was here for meditation. I was telling people that we had 9,300 visitors to our website. And, you know, it was pretty significant. We were pretty happy about that. So we have 700 more to go, and we'll have 10,000. Well, I left the house this morning and just checked it so I could share it with you. We now have 22,400. And we have email. We have email that it is all over the place, and the stuff is coming in. Ethel called, and Albert called yesterday, and they were excited because they were on to the website. They said, "Wow, you know, 21,000. That was yesterday. Today we have 22,400. And, you know, you take off email and it goes like that, and then you go back and turn it on. And I mean, it is just all over the world and all over the place. So I am overwhelmed by it because I can't do it. That's the thing. And so, you know, Joan's been trying to help, and we're having somebody come in to try to help with this, because we have to answer all of these letters of people who sent, you know, and I quickly got on the internet and made another thing on the thing about all the tapes we have, you know, that we could, you know, because I can't, it's no longer what it was. I mean, and it happened all by itself. I was talking to Debbie about it, and she looked at me and she says, "You know, it didn't cost you a penny. Didn't have to advertise. We have spent thousands of dollars in advertising in papers over the years, never got a person." And here we got more people on the website in one day than we had been able to get in 4 years. 22,400. I don't know what in God's name it is now. And, you know, if I could read you the things that people are saying, you know, that they're seeing these things. These are people that have been searching, like people all over the world who have been searching for these things, and they're looking and you know, saying, "Gosh," you know, that they're really touched by the explanations. And so where we go from here, I'm not sure. Right now I have to deal with somehow finding a way that, one, we have to download all of the email addresses from the email list, put them into a base so that, you know, I can use them for communicating in the future. That's a big job. Then we have to take all the names and addresses and put them into the computer. That's a big job. Then we have to send everybody, you know, and so obviously it's a fun.
But tell everybody, though, you do have a pro that's going to help us.
You do have a person that's supposed to come over today, and she kind of does this full time, so it's going to cost us some. But I mean,
You have a legitimate right to start the company, nonprofit or otherwise.
Well,
however you wish.
I understand. I just have to see how. I just have to see how to deal. It's something because you work and you pray for these things to happen, and then when they happen, you're going, what do I do? It's like, what does the dog do when he chases a car and catches it? What do you do now? And so this is where we're at. But I wanted to share it with you, especially today, because you've been a part with me through this thing. And we've arrived at something rather spectacular. Now, whether Mr. Bell calls and we go on that program, that's fine, because what was strange about it wasn't just the person who called his radio program, because after the person called the radio program, somebody must have looked at the site, and because Art Bell then put a link to our website on his website. And so that's why this could go on for a long time, and where it goes from here, I don't know.
Now, you know, how about Don Dale?
Don, what?
Don has been after
Yeah, Don has been after me to call Art Bell for years, and other people have too.
Oh, you got to eat crow.
No, I'll tell you something. I can tell you, if I had called, nothing would have happened. Absolutely nothing would have happened. It was just one of these things, and I still believe this. We just have to wait for this to play out, because I don't believe that we're authoring this. It's the time now, and it's played itself out. So I don't know. Where this started was somebody had put a document out that they had picked up intelligent signals coming from Pegasus. And they were discussing this on the Art Bell show. And then someone called in and told them how long we have been working on Pegasus as the site of the second coming, of new consciousness and so forth, of the book of Revelation. So then, if there are intelligent signals coming from Pegasus, you'd have to say, could it be? Well, I initially, want to just jump up and down and say, wow, this is it, Pegasus, 45, 55, and supernova, and all the things that we've talked about. But on the other hand, we always have to be careful. I don't want to get consumed in New Age emotionalism. I don't want to get consumed in fundamental emotionalism. And that's not a rap at anybody. I just don't want to get involved with any groups, organizations, or other people saying things that don't have some kind of basis in fact, because it's not fair to you. And you get caught up in it, and then you start saying, I told you about the time when I saw on the internet that we were going to have a problem when the Earth passes through the photon belt, so I called NASA. And they told me there was no such thing as a photon belt. They said, the guy made this up. So, I mean, I could have come in here and say, oh, this is going to, I've seen a lot of people do that, but that's not fair. And we've all been through religion, and we've gotten inundated with that kind of stuff of what's happening and what's going to come down because of somebody else's stories. So anyhow, when I started to look at this, and this is what I wanted to share with you, there is a group that, I don't know what happened to this board, but all of a sudden it's not erasing the stuff. I don't know what this means or whatever it is. But anyhow, there is a group, and they're monitoring signals trying to monitor signals from the universe. And they're called SETI. S-E-T-I. That's the name of it. I forget but it's scientific or something, extraterrestrial intelligence. They monitor to see if they can hear any intelligent signals from space, see? And what is that? Anyhow, yeah, Pegasus. The idea or the story here was that a British engineer working for a telecommunications agency, and his name was Dorr, picked up what he felt were intelligent signals coming from EQ Pegasus. Well, the SETI League, this is made up of all of these astronomers. They have 900 bases around the world where they monitor this stuff, and they've been listening for these signals. And none of them were able to find it. They couldn't hear anything. Some of the world's major radio telescopes have been looking for the signal with no success. There's an Australian compact, what they call a compact array telescope, which is 30 times more powerful than the one Dore had. They couldn't find the signal. There was a fellow by the name of Ian Morrison, who is at Jodrell Bank in Australia, and he said that he thought that he had heard something like that, but he thought it might be a satellite and not necessarily any kind of intelligence or whatever. And then other scientists around the world have denounced the findings as a deliberate attempt to trick the world. So, you know, I say, well, what do you know? What's the sense? It's a hoax. You know, who cares? The person who heard the signal is a guy named Paul Dore of the Siemens Plessey Systems in England. And on October the 22nd, he reported detecting signals from Equi Pegasus star system, which is about 22 light years away. And they were the kind of a signal that could not occur naturally. In other words, they had to be made by somebody, you know. And last month, astronomers at the Arecibo Radio Telescope Project in Phoenix, Arizona, also detected a signal from Equi Pegasus, but concluded that it was interference. So they said, you know, they didn't feel that it was anything that wasn't natural, some kind of interference. One of the things that I found as I was trying to sort out this stuff was that, you know, like any other kind of business or any other kind of organizations or whatever, you get involved with SETI, if you don't follow, from what I find out, if you don't follow their procedures, they just will discount. A lot of politics gets involved here because this Paul Dore is not a member of SETI. So then, you know, if he found it, they're convinced they should be the ones to find it. And then that's the way it happens in everything. And so what SETI said is that Paul Dore released his observations without going through their procedures. And because of this, they are suspicious that it's all a hoax. In other words, you didn't follow our procedures, so it's got to be a hoax. So, but there's two things here that are interesting. Number one, the telescope in Phoenix did pick up a signal. They felt it was interference, but they did pick up a signal there that was different, as Dore had. So that's interesting. And also, the Jodrell Banks telescope in Australia believed that Dore picked up signals from a satellite. Now, okay, so that takes care of basically SETI. SETI says, we didn't find it, we couldn't find it. As far as we're concerned, Dore, you didn't go through the proper procedures, so it's a hoax. And there was no signals coming from Pegasus. Jodrell Banks said they heard something, but they think it's interference or a satellite. So we have, so far, the fact that somebody else heard something, but didn't consider it to be intelligent. And SETI says they didn't hear anything, and they don't like it because the procedures weren't followed, and they think it's a hoax. Now, there was a guy in England named K.F. Benton, B-E-N-T-O-N, who's an astronomer in a place in England called Guernsey. I guess where they had the cows, I would assume. But anyhow, he was on a ship off of Normandy, and he says that he's equipped to do this kind of work, and he was listening for signals using an ICOM 8500 and a very large dish, 4.5 meters. Now, this is what I found very interesting. Mr. Denton picked up the signal. He says he picked up the same signal that Dore picked up. What I found very interesting is this, and I'll show this to you. I'd be glad to show this to you. He says, I set the dish and set my radio to scan this frequency between 1445 to 1455 megahertz. I thought that was curious. Here's a guy that says he picked up the signals from Pegasus and he was monitoring 1445 to 1455. And I have this here, and I'll be glad to show it. And if anybody wants a copy of any of this stuff, you know, I'll be glad to give it to you. What Denton said was there was noise. You know, he had a lot of noise, but as soon as Pegasus arose, it wasn't long before my computer locked the radio at 1453.8273 due to a carrier and began logging the Doppler shifting signal. The exact frequency was 1453.8273 with a significant drift. The signal is much weaker than was talked about, but this may indicate, in fact, that it is extraterrestrial rather than earthbound interference. I turned my dish 10 degrees away 5 times after detection, and each time the signal went away, and each time I brought it back to the coordinates, the Pegasus signal reappeared. I had at first thought this was all a hoax, but decided to see for myself. Now that I have verified the signal, I am pretty confident that contact has indeed been made with Pegasus. That's what he said. I don't know. I just thought, what I thought was curious about this whole thing was 4555 showing up in the frequencies, you know. Anything else it could be, but there it is, you know. I mean, there it is again. Well, finally, there were 2 fellows put out a paper about this, which I felt was interesting. One was named Richard Hoagland, and you might have heard this guy's name before. He's a scientist and astronomer, and he had been working on some of these faces that were supposedly monuments that were seen on, what was it, Mars or something, and whether that worked out, I don't think it did anyhow. But he was working on that, and there was another guy named Michael Barra, and they gave some analysis, and they commented on the fact that the SETI community, okay, feels that Doerr committed a hoax partly because Doerr, who wasn't a part of their group, didn't follow their rules. But Hoagland says Doerr had a good reason for not reporting, because he didn't trust the SETI community, and he didn't want to be ridiculed before he had a chance to publish his findings. And then Hoagland and Barra go on to say this, which I think is interesting. It says, setting aside for a moment the implications of a community of scientists who would rather ridicule a possible finding in their chosen field than check it out, there was another group called ACTA who pointed their telescope at Pegasi. After using a very narrow band, they pointed it at the star and it didn't come up with anything. When they switched to a mode with less sensitivity, they had a major hit at 1451.8 megahertz, which they dismissed as probably not related because Doerr's original signal was 1453. And what Hoagland is saying, this was only several degrees off the position. The logic of this conclusion is absurd because, you know, Doerr said, I heard it over here, and you got it over here. And you're saying, well, there can't be the same one. But the point that Hoagland was trying to make, which I think is a good point, he said, you're missing something. You're trying to say that the signal should be coming from here. But what Hoagland says is, you're not considering the fact that, wonder if it's moving. And it's decelerating. And so then he says, you know, you look somewhere. The signal that this ACTA picked up was described as a megaphone blast of biblical proportions. And what they're saying, it is unimaginable that a spike, which is twice the amplitude of background noise, could be interference. And so you know, I'm trying to look at everybody, what everybody's saying, and there's logic on both sides here. But anyhow, what Hoagland goes on to say, he says, assuming that any signal of a cellar source is not related is about the smart as assuming that a traffic light isn't related to your car because it's not directly in front of you. It would seem it's only logical then, he said, if it's not where we said it was, to check in the general vicinity to see if it's close by, someplace else. And so then Hoagland makes this statement, which is pretty cute. He says, I mean, didn't it ever occur to these guys that E.T. might have a car phone? What he's saying is, you know, you're saying if it's not, he could be moving. So then he goes on to say, the people who believe this is a hoax go on to argue that it must be a satellite signal because it is modulating, jumping up and down. And Hoagland says, okay, which satellite? It's fairly easy to check for a terrestrial satellite in that area, but there is none. And then he says there's another perfectly reasonable explanation for the observed modulation. He says it's pinging. The idea, now this is where it gets interesting for ET fans. He says the idea of an approaching probe sending out a navigation beacon evidently is beyond the SETI mindset. So what Hoagland is saying, could this possibly be an approaching probe, approaching the Earth, sending out a navigational beacon? But he says to dismiss the signal as a satellite simply because it's not on a star and seems to be dropping in frequency is overtly stupid. The fact is the signal has all the characteristics that they should be logically looking for if they are actually interested in finding ET. If the target is moving, Hoagland says, and decelerating, in other words, it's coming down and it's slowing down, then we can expect that it will continue to drift farther from the position of Pegasi, and its frequency will continue to drop. And further, observations are essential if we're to determine what this is. And so then they start getting hot and they start calling each other names, between SETI and everybody does this. But one thing that Hoagland says, one thing we know more than we knew yesterday, and that the signal is real. Whether it's an intelligence or whether it's not, there's a signal there. And the fact is the signal has moved. And so we've heard from SETI that says they couldn't find anything. We've heard from Jodrell Banks and this other outfit that says, well, we heard something, but it doesn't sound like it's, we don't know what. It sounded like interference. We heard from this guy Denton in the ship off of Normandy who said, yes, he heard it. And this Mr. Dorr who said definitely he heard it. And then, of course, Hoagland and Barra saying what could very well be a logical explanation as to why people are not hearing it now is because it's moving. Could it be approaching us, decelerating, changing frequency? It's logical. It's very possible. So here's a point where we as scientists say we have to put the whole thing under the microscope, and we can't simply say, well, SETI is right. They couldn't find it, so it doesn't exist. And we can't say Hoagland and Barra are right. It's moving. We don't know. No. But are we going to say then all of a sudden that this guy, maybe Mr. Dorr is not a unemployed, he's a scientist, he's an astronomer, and he says he heard it. And Denton, who's an astronomer, said he heard it. Now, if they're both lying and making up things, but see, there's something to me that proves that in a way it's not a. One of the things that I'm using here for our purpose is this 1445 to 1455 to me is interesting, but there's something more interesting than that to me. And that is that the writers, the mystics, the ancients, the Greeks, whomever, said that the activity that would stimulate this thing that you're all looking for would start in Pegasus. And even if this was a lie, everybody all over the place is looking to Pegasus. Pegasus is the center of this thing. And it's gotten people's attention to look at Pegasus for something that's going to happen. There was another interesting thing that Hoagland said at the end of his, and I don't know if any of you have seen this. And it doesn't mean anything except he seems to feel that someone may be dropping into the minds, those on the inside who know what's going to happen. He said, you may have noticed a series of strange commercials on CNN election coverage the other night. There were two from a company called Quest. One featured a man in a boat watching what is described as a shooting star or a large burning body dropping through the atmosphere and descending towards the Earth. I didn't see that one. The other features pyramids, data transfers, disc-shaped objects, and horses. And he says, Pegasus, anyone? And they both end with the slogan, and I did see this on CNN, the world is about to become a very different place. These were on CNN, and there was one that's very interesting because it shows like the stars lassoing something and then a horse pulling it across the sky and so forth. Anyhow. And then Hoagland says, finally, if these seemingly escalating events are real, and we are on the verge of a major revelation, it must follow that the in-crowd, and I consider you to be the in-crowd, knows about it. The commercials are indicative of a growing trend of suspicious images and symbolic references from the placement of Orion in the movie Apollo 13, and Pegasus, everybody wearing the Pegasus patch and so forth and so on. Anyhow, the thing now that really I want you to consider here today in all of this is the fact that when we talk of the signal that came down and the possibility of this being a moving vehicle, maybe not one, maybe thousands of moving vehicles. You know, but then again, we don't know. And I've always told you, I never look at this as being the portent of something evil. This is something tremendously good. But anyhow, let's continue with it. What occurred to me when Hoagland said, could this be a moving entity who's sending out a navigational beacon as they're moving towards us? Now, what I'd like you to do, if you have your stuff here, if you don't, I'll read it to you. But I'd like you to pick up page 87. On page 87 was an amazing thing that occurred. Right after the discovery of the planet in Pegasus, there was an article in the paper, the Associated Press, and it says, Hubble finds possible evidence of black hole amid Pegasus. This is what's interesting to me in light of what Hoagland says about ships or entities accelerating, coming towards the Earth. Peering deeply into a spot seen from Earth as a single blur of light, the Hubble telescope has discovered either a black hole in our galaxy or an equal rarity, thousands of stars rushing towards the core of a globular cluster. Like bees swarming to their hive is how the Space Telescope Science Institute described the star's convergence. And then I said in the bottom of the second paragraph, second column, it's a dense star cluster like a mini galaxy at the University of California at Santa Cruz. And then at the bottom of the third column, it says spectra can tell us how far the stars are moving, whether they are moving towards us or away from us. Okay, now my question is, wonder if they're not stars. And they're moving towards us. And they're sending out beacon signals. Is it possible? Absolutely. Is there something up there? Absolutely, because you see it in the Associated Press. They spotted it. And where was it? It's in the constellation Pegasus. Okay? Read it again. It's on page 87 of the stuff that we had. And it says, the stars rushing towards the core of a globular cluster like bees swarming to their hive, a dense star cluster. Look at the second column. It's in M15, 37,000 light years away, in the constellation Pegasus. Okay? And then at the bottom of the third column, spectra can tell us how far the stars are moving and whether they are moving towards us or away from us. So something is quite possibly moving towards us, thousands of them, in constellation Pegasus. Somebody has picked up intelligence signals from the constellation Pegasus, so they say, and Hoagland is possibly saying, well, could this be then entities coming towards the Earth and putting out navigational signals, beacon signals? Is it possible? So, you know, to me, I would set that, and then of course on top of that, this other guy over here finds his frequency at 45, 45, 45, 55, and so forth. So it's an interesting concept, and it's a possibility. So we have thousands of stars swarming to their hives, stars rushing towards this core. If they're moving towards us, if they're not the stars, then it becomes very interesting. There's something else moving towards us. And this is why it's interesting. If you look in the Bible at page 1013, in the book of Revelation, in the book of Revelation, and in Revelation chapter 19, there's something there that becomes, you know, important. It says in Revelation chapter 19, in verse 11, and I saw heaven open, and behold, a white horse. He that sat upon him was faithful and true. It's not talking about a man or Jesus or whatever. It's talking about the return of a cosmic energy of new consciousness. Okay? And basically, that would then be the first hint that whatever is going to come, that's going to start in Pegasus. And that's where the planet was discovered. That's now where they're finding these signals. And that's now where some of these people are opinioning that possibly these could be entity vehicles coming this way, sending out beacon signals, navigational signals. But you know, there's more to it. And when we looked at that Associated Press article, it said thousands of stars coming, maybe rushing towards the Earth like a globular cluster. What was interesting about that is that in Revelation 19, right where you are, verse 14, it says, "And the armies which were in heaven followed him upon white horses, clothed in fine linen, white and clean." Well, that would account then for thousands of stars coming from Pegasus, the same place, like from a globular cluster swarming like that. So there's something there. Could that be the signal, say? And remember that newspaper article about the stars swarming came out just a short time after the discovery was made in Pegasus by the science in Switzerland, yes?
If you go over to the last paragraph on that page 87.
Yes. If we go over to the last paragraph on page 87, yes.
It says that the stars could be under the influence of one.
Yes, that's good. Yeah. Yeah, that's very good. That's good, John. If you look at the very last column on page 87, it says the stars could be under the influence of one giant central object. Now, is that one giant central object the one who's sending these navigational signals out? I don't know. I don't even know if there are, but something is there, isn't there? And it's under the control. And I mean, what you just read here is comments from NASA, National Aeronautics and Space Administration. You're not reading stuff from, you know. I mean, this stuff, okay, take it with a grain of, take it all with a grain of salt. On the internet, I don't know. They're scientists and they're astronomers, but they all got but something, they're saying something occurred. So we're looking at it because if we simply sit here and say, oh, this is a lot of baloney, let's go on to something else, wonder if it's not. So we have to be careful about that. We have to be, you know, considerate about that. White like stars, armies following in Pegasus, and they talk in the Associated Press of thousands. And if that's the case, then you've got something here of biblical proportion. Attach this to the fact of Pluto taking its position with Charon, April 15th, 1999, and then the other statements by NASA that the light from supernova 1987A will be touching down on the Earth at approximately the year 2000 to 2002. It's very close. Say, very close, very interesting. And so, come on, I mean, be honest about this, be reasonable about this. You and I both feel very strongly and know very strongly that there is an intelligence beyond us. And everything that we've read and everything that we've come together with makes it seem like the stage has been set and the sky has been writing and telling us something is about to happen. And it's something good that's about to happen. Well, let me just show you, it doesn't look good because there's a lot of people that are not going to enjoy this. Because, you know, the time of overlording on people, oppressing people, taking money from people, exploiting people is going to end. And there's a lot of people who exploit, overlord, and take money from others who don't like to lose that possibility. But let's see, you know, basically, what are we talking about here? Let's just say something. If these, I mean, let's get right down to and talk, you know, in the way they're talking here. Say these are ships. Say these are ships being piloted by people, you know? Okay, I don't know. And they were sending out navigational beacons. And they were here, and then somebody looked, and they're over here, whatever, who knows. But something is coming towards the Earth. Could be thousands of them. And then you have the correspondence from NASA that said, yes, we found thousands of these white lights in the sky, and they're all rushing. We're not sure if they're coming towards the Earth or going away from the Earth, but we saw all of these things. So NASA confirms something's going on, and it's going on in Pegasus. Okay? So it's documented. It's going, something is going on in Pegasus. And so now if we have all of this happening, suddenly we have the entire scientific community looking up towards Pegasus for one thing or the other. Scientists discovered a planet. NASA is exploring what these thousands of lights are up there. And now everybody else has got signals pointing up at Pegasus. And the Bible talked about thousands coming. And the Bible said all of this is going to happen in the sign of the white horse, Pegasus. Connect that with the other thing. Connect it with another important part that's very, very interesting here. And this is one of the things that I communicated to Art Bell, by email, and I haven't heard anything yet because I just did it yesterday, but this is very important. In the sky, all of this activity is happening in Pegasus, but you have a Pegasus in your head, and that's the hippocampus of the brain, which is the part of memory. We've been through this a dozen times, but the word hippocampus means seahorse. It is a white eminence. It is the color like in your brain is white, okay? In the middle of that thing is a thing called Amon's horn. It's a little horn-like thing in the middle of your hippocampus. Amon's other name is Amen. So it says Jesus comes back on a white horse, of course, because it comes back in the hippocampus of the brain and comes back through the constellation Pegasus. So these things are there. Very, very possible. Very, unless everybody just made all of this stuff up and it's just a coincidence. It's like, I remember when I was in Catholic school many years ago, the nun said these coincidences are like taking a bowl of alphabet soup and spilling them on the floor and having them spell out the Bible. Well, that's not, you can't have coincidences like that. There is an intelligent thing going on here for whatever purpose. And in my heart, I would feel that the purpose is to change the ways of the earth away from the oppressor. But let me just give you an idea. If these are entities like we're talking about, what would happen? Okay. So the white horse comes, Pegasus, followed by thousands of others which we're talking about, whether they be the stars, whether they're sending signals, who knows. At least you know about it, okay? You go out of here, I'm not telling you to make any conclusions, you know about it, okay? But what could this be for? Let's take page 1014. And on page 1014, in Revelation 19, it follows up on what happens after the Pegasus signal or the white horse comes and then thousands of others behind the white horse. It follows up on that. Revelation chapter 19 and verse 18. That you may eat the flesh of kings and the flesh of captains and the flesh of mighty men. Well, in Revelation 19:17 it says there was an angel in the sunny cloud. He cried with a loud voice saying to all the fowls that fly in the midst of the air, okay, that you may eat the flesh of kings and the flesh of captains and the flesh of mighty men and the flesh of horses and all of them that sit on them and all that kind of, but what in the heck is that all about? Oh my God, what, are you going to have birds come down here and be pecking everybody's head and all this kind of stuff? Well, obviously it doesn't mean that. The birds represent the soaring thoughts that come from the higher realms of consciousness. They soar in the air, which is the third stage. As you know, in Greek, and this is all Greek mythology, none of this happens in the literal sense. This is all Greek mythology. These are these words used to describe something else. But in Greek mythology, you have 5 stages of consciousness. Would you throw this away so I don't... You have 5 stages of consciousness. And your first stage is earth, which is your head. Your second stage is water, which you rise to when you enter into meditation. Your third stage is air, where you separate from the thoughts of the mind. Your fourth stage is fire, where you make contact with the higher realms. And then your fifth stage is the new mind, and that's the way it works in Greek. That's why you have baptism, because you take your head, you put it in the water, you rise up into the air, and then you're touched by the Spirit. You don't really go in real water. Well, we do, but we're not supposed to. This is the way, because what you're then going to have occur is you're going to have a change of mind, you're going to have a change of consciousness by doing this. You're going to get nothing. You may even get sick if you go into a lot of the waters around here and get, restored. Oh, I'm saved. No, you're not. You got the flu because you're in the polluted water. Anyhow. So basically then what we have here is that the air is the third stage of consciousness, where then the higher thoughts, which are the fowl, the birds, come. And what do? They eat the flesh of men, meaning they devour that which is the lower aspects of the mind, the lower aspects of the flesh, the things that have caused us to be operating in a totally stress mode all of our lives, trying to survive in the nightmare that is the competitions of the earth and the wars of the earth and the violence and the rapes and the pillagings and so forth. So the birds represent the soaring thoughts from on high, from the third stage of consciousness, a new consciousness from the air, which is that third stage. And eating the flesh means they devour all of the old traditions, all of the old doctrines that have provided the earth with fear and guilt and war and separation. So the change comes upon everyone. It says both large and small, and both free and bond. I mean, you have the change. You people have actually experienced the birds. You've actually gone up into that third stage, up into the air, up beyond the thoughts of the mind, and there you've had the birds, which are the new thoughts that come down from on high, devouring the flesh, meaning taking away things that have hurt you, taking away fears that have imprisoned you, and so forth. And that's what, it doesn't mean, just you or I who sit here in this room. I mean, all of a sudden, Mr. Netanyahu in Israel, in spite of everybody saying, don't do it, don't sign the agreement, he signs it. Why? Because of the fact that there were birds flying. There's something in his consciousness. And Yasser Arafat, who some years ago was going around just blowing everybody inside up, this guy's signing a peace agreements and hugging everybody. Why? Because the same thing has touched him in this new time that we're living in. The flesh which has cried out for revenge and violence, which still stirs in many. And I mean, both of these guys have a very good chance of being knocked off by people who just dwell in this realm of violence and confrontation. But others are feeling the wings of the birds flying through the air, feeling something inside of themselves, which take them and saying, I know something's happening. I know something's going to happen. I don't know what it is. I don't understand what it is. But I know something is going to change. A tremendous change coming down. And though you, as you sit in here, have found, and we've logically expressed to you ways that we can think this is very, very possible, because all of this is documented scientifically and very, very logical and very scientifically based, you see. So now the horse that is going to be devoured, and who's the horse whose flesh is going to be eaten by the birds? Who's the horse whose flesh is going to be devoured by the thoughts that come from the higher realms in the air? The red horse. The emotions, the emotions that actually make you sick. I mean, most people who lay in hospital beds, somewhere along the line, the stress has killed people. We've seen people who've had cancer. We've seen people who've had cancer that go in remission, and then something happens in their life, and they become emotionally stressed, and the next thing you know, they're dead. And the black horse, which is the intellect, which of course is driven by the people who sit out on the street and say, oh, I've got to see it, this is all nonsense and all of these things. This also, your black horse was destroyed a long time ago, because now you listen to a higher sound. You follow the beat of a different drum. It doesn't belong to this earth and its traditions and its doctrines. You're following something else. You're walking alone. You're walking out into a field with just you and God, and you say, I don't want to hear from any of these other people. I don't want to join anything. I don't want to be connected with anything. I want to be a part. I just want to be able to make sure that I'm connected when this all comes down. If there is something coming down, and if this thing is sending out a beacon, it's an electromagnetic field coming down, and that's why you should be inside, and you should be collapsing the wave so that that which is coming down, if it is a particle that finds you, and then it's like, all right, here's one whose light has been turned on. You have a light in your house inside of here. You have a green light in your house inside of here, turned on, waiting for this to occur. And it is Pegasus who carries this Christ, or the new Christ consciousness, and carries the thunderbolts of Zeus, which bring enlightenment, as lightning from the east to the west. That's what Pegasus did, you know. Why is there a white horse in the Bible? Why does it say it comes back in a white horse? Because it's Greek mythology, and the white horse is Pegasus. That's why. This is who wrote it. Okay? And so Pegasus not only carries the Christ, but Pegasus carried Zeus, and Pegasus was the one that carried the lightning bolts. And Zeus would throw lightning bolts all over the place, which meant that enlightenment comes from the higher realms of God. And enlightenment comes from who? Pegasus. That's what, see, when they wrote, but when these guys were writing this stuff, they weren't writing about horses, they weren't writing about lightning bolts, they're writing about enlightenment that comes from electromagnetic fields from a particular constellation, and they're saying it comes from Pegasus. And where's it coming from? Pegasus. Where's the whole thing? Everybody's talking about Pegasus, Pegasus, Pegasus. And where, all of a sudden, because of Pegasus, we that had a website that had 9,000, now it's got 24,000 or whatever it is, and all over the place. For why? Because of Pegasus. And everybody that's coming on almost everybody, can you tell me about Pegasus? Where do you have Pegasus on? Everybody, Pegasus. They didn't even know about Pegasus before. Now they know about Pegasus. But the important part to understand is not only does it say in the Christian Bible that Christ consciousness returns on Pegasus, but it says in the myths that the lightning bolts of enlightenment comes from the back of Pegasus. And the Pegasus in your mind, in your brain, is the hippocampus, which is the point of memory. Okay. Revelation 19:19 is exactly why the movement of those from above is hidden from the systems of the world. And I'll tell you something. Let me just share it with you, my personal opinion, and all of this stuff, Those people who will come here will not come here announced to the countries and the governments of the world, because the countries and the governments of the world are totally corrupt. Totally corrupt. And all that any of them together can be is destroyed. They don't understand UFOs. They'll never see a UFO. And the reason they'll never see a UFO is because only those who have adjusted to the frequency inside can see a UFO. Because UFOs do not come from outer space, they come from inner space. They'll never understand a crop circle, although I know they got guys going around with things and all that kind of stuff. But there are thousands and thousands that are not from guys going around doing like that they never understand because they don't understand the symbols in the crop circles. So someday, if we have time, take a picture and start looking at the symbols and what they mean. And even if there was some guy going around doing something like, what symbol is he making? And does he know what he's making and what message is being conveyed? But they'll never see that. And in the same way, the people who try to come and hear these signals won't hear them. And why? Look at page 1014 and look at Revelation 19:19. And as something is coming from above, as something is coming from the white horse Pegasus, what do the people of the earth do? Revelation 19:19. And I saw the beast, which is talking about the systems, and the kings of the earth and their armies gathered together to make war against him that sat on the horse and against his army. Oh, going to make war against who? Pegasus. The winged horse of beauty flying across the... And what do our group do? Get out your Scud missiles. Can we take it out? We got to get IBM. And you'll see the army coming out and the generals, we've got intercontinental ballistic missiles. And they'll be shooting down the white horse. But they will never see it until it gets here. That's the good part. That's the good part. I mean, come on, if this is really true and if these things are coming, who the heck is, where have we arrived to be even able to conceive of dealing with the mentality that they have? So the ones that cannot deal with what is to come upon the earth cannot see. They don't understand and they'll laugh at you. Only those who sit in the stillness of the still small voice and collapse the wave of light to a particle can receive those who come on the wings of Pegasus. Only those. And then in Revelation 19:20, on page 1014 that we were looking at, it says, and the beast was taken, and with him the false prophet that wrote miracles before him, which he deceived them that had received the mark of the beast, and them that worshipped the beast, and they were cast alive into a lake of burning fire with brimstone. The beast was taken, and them that worshipped his image, which is the image of the competitive forces that have made you all sick, that have made you try to seek 2 or 3 jobs in order to survive, that have made you try to be able to pay the fines or whatever the heck the government takes, or who have placed the poor people into abject poverty and constructed great churches and all this kind of stuff. Cast into the lake of fire, which is simply the realms of the force. The entire mindset is changed. The whole way of living is changed. The whole civilization, the whole social order is changed. Purged and made pure by a new understanding. All the dross is burned away, and that which is gold is left to be apparent to everybody. And the very fact that those upon the earth realize that upon Pegasus come forth those who will bring a new civilization will cause this civilization to collapse. Oh, sure, I know you hear, well, Y2K, it's all part of it. It's all part of it, all of the confusion, it's all part of it. And how it will happen. See? That's the lake of fire. What you see here is totally astronomical in nature. Let me show you. In Revelation chapter 20, verse 1, on page 1014, it says, I saw an angel come down from heaven having the key of the bottomless pit and a great chain in his hand. And he laid hold on the dragon, that old serpent, the devil and Satan, bound him 1,000 years, cast him into the bottomless pit and shut him up and sealed him up, that he should deceive the nations no more, till the 1,000 years should be fulfilled, and after that he might be loosed for a little season. The serpent in this case is what is being talked about right here in this part of Revelation. The serpent being discussed is Saturn, Satan, Saturn. And what happens here is that Saturn is overcome as the controlling factor of this age by Uranus, which is called the son of man. But what will happen, it says, where it says that after that he must be loosed for a little season, that means that Saturn will rise again and replace Uranus for a shorter time. Of course, a little season in astronomical terms could be thousands of years. You know, God knows, say. And I saw, and it says in Revelation 24, and I saw thrones, and sat upon them, judgment was given unto them. And I saw the souls of men that were beheaded for the witness of Jesus and for the word of God, which had not worshipped the beast, neither his image. And neither had they had the mark upon their foreheads, and all this kind of business. They had been beheaded. Every one of you that I know personally here has been beheaded. John the Baptist, the whole thing of being beheaded, nobody gets beheaded. It's talking about cutting away that which is the mind from the influx of garbage and fear and guilt that comes from the out. You're beheaded when you cut away all that, when you separate from the thoughts of the mind, when you take no thought, when you rise to that third stage of consciousness which is there, you've been beheaded. Beheaded means cutting away the carnal thoughts, focusing on the higher through meditation, focusing on collapsing that wave and turning it into a particle so that you can receive these signals wherever they may be coming from. And it's just amazing to me that they are coming from Pegasus, right? They could be coming from any place else in the universe, couldn't they? You know how many constellations there are? Skillions of them. Where is it coming from? Pegasus. You know how many constellations there are? Skillions of them. Where did they find the first planet orbiting the sun star? Pegasus. Do you know how many constellations there are? Skillions of them. And yet that one place, Pegasus, was named to fit into your brain as the hippocampus of the brain, the white seahorse. Living with Christ means living in the realm of Christ consciousness, Krishna consciousness, Buddha consciousness, 1,000 years. A resurgence then will come to the competitive ways, but this is the point, see. We were way down here. We were splitting rocks and we were selling sheep, and I mean, nobody knew anything, and all of the and then suddenly the Platos came, and the Aristotles came, Diogenes came, and they gave us a basis of civilization. So we started to come from here, and we got up to here. We got pretty smart. And then when this resurgence or the restoration of Saturn and Uranus is gone for that 1,000 years, we'll get cut back to here. Gosh, we'll get cut back to here. But then, see, the next time we'll rise even higher. And this is the evolution. This is the way the human mind evolves. This is the way the human consciousness evolves. This is the way you and I can evolve. I know the things that I'm talking about here aren't what we've talked about the last 2 weeks. We talked about Mani and good and evil and all of these things. We got into the philosophies and the psychologies of the mind. We're talking about something totally different. But it's not fair to have all of these things going on and not at least be aware of them. And then at least kind of put them in context with what you and I have talked about, and put them in context with what the mythology contained in this book. This has nothing to do with the Bible. This is mythology. It's Greek mythology by people who knew. This is the kind of stuff that comes from people like Zeno, who was a quantum physicist 2,000 years ago. This is the kind of stuff that comes from people like Democritus, who talked about electrons and splitting the atom over 2,000 years ago. This is what's written in here. It has nothing to do with church or Christians or any of that stuff. This has to do with the mythology about the universe, the cosmos, and about you and your mind and how it's connected and what's going to happen. From people who lived elsewhere and who are able to know because they've experienced what has happened. But now the light is reaching you. Now the light's touching down on you. In Revelation 25 in verse says, but the rest of the dead lived not again until the 1,000 years were finished. This is the first resurrection. That simply means those who don't find this inner pathway. And it represents the state of the carnal and competitive consciousness are not going to be able to overcome or rise back to the place or the positions they had in oppressing people until Saturn returns. During the 1,000, they'll live without the power that they have presently, but they're going to seek to restore their old ways back. You can't. You can sit here, and I can sit here, and I got a nice television, we got a nice car, and you go on vacation and all this stuff, and I always say, well, everything is wonderful. Everything is wonderful. It's a beautiful day today. This is the day. This is the day that the Lord. But you know, there's 7,000 people down in Nicaragua that were just wiped out. I mean, what about them? What about the people that are down there living in cardboards and, you know, getting a blow? What about the people that you see in Africa? What about the people all over the world who live in crap? But you see, the people that are coming here, they don't look at bankers. They don't care about bankers. They don't look at Wall Street. They don't look at all of that stuff. They look at you. You're a person. But you're no different. You're no better. You're no worse than the little black kid that lives in Nairobi or wherever they come, or the little person in South America that doesn't, or the person in Haiti. Everybody's a human being. Right. Now, it's a wonderful, wonderful thing if you're willing to share the world with all life and the animals and all nature. You're willing to share the world, then you're going to stay in and you're going to be receptive. And your wave will collapse in here from your meditation, and the beacon